So today we will be continue putting that's from basic. Oh my gosh, that's from basic.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the 25th Qt tutorial with C++ and GUI programming. Today we're going to learn a little bit more about the Qt main window, so go ahead and go New, Project, Qt GUI application, and call this status bar fun. You can name it whatever you want, and put it in the usual location wherever you've been building these. Make sure you've got the Qt main window selected. And just next till you get here. Alright, now, if you've been following along with these tutorials, you know what the Q actions are. So we're just going to make one real quick called do something. And then we're just going to drag and drop the Q action onto the toolbar. And we can set up the go to slot triggered. And this is all review for you so far. Let's add in our includes. We'll say Qt core. And as you know, when you click that action, it's going to trigger this block of code right here. Now what we're going to learn today is a little bit about the status bar. So let's say UI status bar, and you want to do show message. Now you'll notice show message has two parameters, or I should say two arguments, and one of them's optional. So you say a message, and the optional parameter is the timeout. So let's fire this up, run it, see what happens. Let's move the window over here, you click it, and you might be wondering why that didn't show. What's going on here? Well, we notice how we got 2. Let's try doing 2000. You might be going, holy smokes, Batman, 2000. Because it's in milliseconds. Notice how when you click it, 1 1000, 2 1000, and it goes away. Whenever you do the show message, it's in milliseconds. So if you sit here and go 1, that's 1 millisecond. It's going to paint and disappear so fast you'll never see it. Now if you omit that parameter and just run this, because that's an optional parameter, when you click this, it's just going to display. Now I'm not sure if it stays there forever on all platforms or just some, but when you leave out that parameter on Windows, it'll just sit there, I think, just forever. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. Alright, now, one thing that's usually very difficult in other programming languages, but is actually very easy with the Qt framework, is adding controls to that status bar. So let's go into our main window.h. Let's just add a few includes here. We'll just add Qt core. And whoops. Qt GUI. And let's say we want to add in we'll say Q label. And we want a pointer, so we'll say, call it stat label. And a Q progress bar. Alright. Now let's jump into our constructor code here. Say stat label equal new Q label. And we're just going to make this the parent. And if you remember your C++ programming, this is just a reference to the current object, which in this case is just the Q main window. So Q progress. Alright, now, how do we get these into the status bar? It's actually very simple. Go UI, status bar, and we'll say add permanent widget. Now you notice there's an add widget and add permanent widget. What's the difference between these two? Well, an add widget will allow the show message function that we just used to overwrite it, where the add permanent widget makes it permanent. It can never be overwritten. Alright, so let's just add the stat label, and then UI, status bar, add permanent widget, and we are going to add the stat progress. Alright, save your work, compile and run. This might take a second. It's Friday night, my computer's virus scanning. There we go. You notice there's our progress bar, and there's the label. Doesn't really say anything, so you don't see it. So let's actually say stat label, set text, hello. And there it is. Now, how do you tell where these are going to be placed? Very simple. It always places from right to left. If you wonder what this blank space over here is, that's the text of the progress bar. So you can actually say stat progress, and we will say set text visible. We'll say false. And let's actually just, for the sake of clarity here, let's actually discuss one other thing. You'll notice that when you're adding the permanent widget, there is a second parameter. It's not shown up in the video, but it's called stretch. Now what stretch does is determine how far this will stretch across the screen. For example, if we run this now, the progress bar only goes so far.
Oh my gosh!
But if we add in a 1 and run it, notice how it takes up the whole bottom of the status bar now. And notice that when you click do something, the message isn't displayed because we've set these as permanent. And then you can just manipulate these the way you normally would. For example, you can say stat progress dot set value, and we'll just say 45 because I know that's just under half. Compile and run this. Now when you click it, there you go. So that in a nutshell is how you add things to the status bar. This is Brian. Compile and run this. Set value, and then you can, and we'll just say 45 because I know, for example, that when you can directly fire that we did your C plus stat label winner, adding, so don't quarter on platforms or here and go show go to the 22, put it, drag it. As you know, this message parameter, if you actually direct, how does this get things? It's the visible here, the video normally was I know you status bar. Hey everybody, this is Brian, and welcome to the 26Q tutorial with C++ and GUI programming. Today we're going to cover the Q message box. So let's just go File, New Qt GUI application, and it's pretty much the same thing we've been doing. Put it in the usual location, and we're going to give it a Q dialog. Just hit OK and finish. And once we get our window here, let's just resize this a bit. I'm going to throw a few buttons on here. And we're going to say information, question. Oops, probably make that a capital. And let's line that up here. Warning. And let's just say custom. Alright, and let's set our layout and resize as needed. So we've got 4 buttons here: information, question, warning, and custom. And we're going to show a queue message box, and we're going to make it different each time. So let's select information, go to slot, clicked, and then there's our, and let's just type info so we know which one this is. And we need to add our includes before we do anything else. We're going to get some weird error messages here. So let's go include queue core and include queue GUI. Alright, save our work. Now the queue message box, you've seen this many times so far, so this is going to be relatively review for you, but we're going to show you a few new tricks, so pay attention. Alright, so queue message box information, and the parent will be this, and the string or the title, we'll just say title here, and let's actually drop down a line, and then we need the text, and then you can actually keep adding things. For example, you can add buttons. We're not going to do that for the information. We just want a standard information. And let's go back to our form. But first, we're going to copy this. Then we're going to do question. So just go to slot, clicked. And it's pretty much the same thing. The only difference is you have to add buttons to the question because you're asking a question. So what sort of buttons do you want to add? Well, the type of buttons depend on the question you're asking. So let's just say, do you like cats? And let's go down here and go queue. Oops, something else popped up and stole my mouse. Sorry about that. Queue message box. Yes. And we want to do an OR. So queue message box. No. We just want to give them a simple yes or no. And there are other options you can explore, but for the queue question, the queue message box with the static question, we're just going to do yes or no. Alright, let's save and run this, just make sure it works so far. And click information, and there's title here, text here. You see it's got the information icon. And question, do you like cats? Yes or no? So, one thing you might be asking is, well, how do you get the response back from the user? I mean, how do you know which button they clicked? Well, that's a good question. So let's say, alright, queue message box, standard button, and we'll call this, oops, call this reply, and then we're just going to simply say reply equals. So once you've said reply equals, and then you can just grab the reply, and let's just say if reply equal, and we'll say queue message box yes, then do something. So in this case, we're just going to say, actually I'll just copy this for the sake of argument. We're going to just display an information box here saying you like cats. Actually, we'll say you love cats. There we go. Let's get rid of that text. So just kind of over-inundating the user with message boxes here. So let's compile and run this. Uh-oh, we have a bobo. Invalid use of non-static message expected before reply. What did we do wrong here? I think we have the wrong type. Standard button. There we go. did have the wrong type. We had the lowercase version. We want the uppercase version. The difference between those two is the standard button lowercase is an object. The standard button uppercase is an actual enumeration. So let's compile and run this. Do you like cats? If we say no, nothing happens. If we say yes, you love cats. So that's how you get the response back from the Q message boxes. You just do a Q message box standard button, remember the capital, and give it a variable name and then say variable equals. And that's how you do that. Alright, now what about our others, the warning and the custom? Let's go to slot, clicked, and you guessed it, just warning.
Right.
And it's got the same argument list, so we really don't have to do a whole lot there. And then custom, and let's go to slot, clicked, and this one we're going to have a little bit of fun with here. So let's say Q message box question this, this, and we want to do the title. So we'll say my title, and then the text, and we'll say my, having keyboard difficulties here today. My text here. And then we have buttons. This is where the real power of a message box comes in. You can add all sorts of buttons. So we'll say Q message box. We'll say yes to all, or Q message box yes, or Q message box no. I'm sure you've seen a dialogue similar to this at one point. You can kind of guess what I'm building here. And we'll say Q message box and no to all. And add our semicolon here. So save and run this. Alright, now warning. Warning has the typical warning icon. You've noticed that these dialog boxes are all very similar code-wise, but they look very different. It's all about relaying information back to the end user. And we click custom. My text here, yes, yes to all, no, no to all. So you could say something like, are you sure you want to overwrite this file? Yes, yes to all, no, no to all. And then you can just simply grab the response back using this technique I showed you here. Let's just copy this and paste it. Whoops, silly me, I put it in the wrong one. Go down to our custom here. So it's that simple. Working with message boxes is relatively easy in just about every language, and Qt gives you an extensive amount of options with the message box. I mean, you can do literally just about anything you can think of with a message box. So by all means, use them. Your users will love you. Just don't pop one up on the screen every 5 seconds, and yeah, well, you know how the users will act with that. So this is Brian. I hope you found this video educational and entertaining, and thank you for watching. Hey everybody, this is Brian, and welcome to the 26th Qt tutorial with C++ and GUI pro. So for many Q message box information in the parent, actually keep adding things. For example, you have a button. Make sure. All right. I information of the ring love and the cabinet option. You know, really simple. You are now very small. You can find with list. That's how you respond to the over table. Yeah. So Q button. Let's go. Q need. It's let's guys a new Qt GUI application. Hey everybody, this this is Brian. Welcome to the 27th Qt tutorial with C++ and GUI programming. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to step away from the GUI portion and delve into a little more difficult subject matter because I think you guys are ready for it. Alright, so fire open Qt Creator and go File, New, and let's make a new project, and we're going to make a console application. I'm going to stay away from the GUI portion just because I really want you to understand the concepts without the GUI really cluttering anything up. So, and we'll call this timer. Whoops, let's call this my timer test. Put it wherever you normally put it. And next, finish. And what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a Qt timer. If you don't know what a timer is, think of a clock on the wall. That's a perfect example of a timer. It counts. Every second, the second hand moves. Every minute, the minute hand moves. Every hour, the hour hand moves. So it's actually 3 timers in one. Seconds, minutes, hours. You get the point. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a very simple timer. So what we need to do here is actually create a class. So I'll go add new, and we're going to go Qt. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to go C++, C++ class, and we need to give it a name here. So we will say my timer, and we're not going to fill in base class or any of this other information because I want to explain some stuff as we go. So just leave it as is and hit next and finish, and it creates my timer h and my timer.cpp, which in themselves are pretty much blank. They just look like a standard C++ class. So let's fill in some includes here. Get that out of the way. Qt core. And then in the mytimer.cpp, we're going to do the same thing. Include Qt core. Sorry about that, I've got my keyboard set up for Call of Duty Black Ops, so it's doing crazy things as I type. Alright, so let's say include, and we'll just say qdebug. Now let's flip back into the header here. We want to be able to use the signal slot mechanism in Qt. In order to do that, this class has to be a Qt object. So what you need to do is actually inherit the Qt object. And you could do Qt widget or anything else, but we're just going to use the Qt object, which is the basic object in Qt. Now, there's one more step, and this is often a misstep, and it will cause a lot of frustration. You have to add the Qt object macro. What this does is it converts this class into a true Qt object, so it can actually use the signal slot mechanism. Without this, the mock or meta object compiler, which runs in the background every time you compile this, will not work. If you're wondering what mock does, it actually connects the signals and slots that we've learned about, connects them all together. But once you have the inherited part and the Qt object macro, you're good to go. And I'd actually at this point recommend you just build it just to make sure it compiles, because if it doesn't compile at this point, you're not going to get anything to run right. As you see, we had a successful build, so we can continue. Alright, now we're just going to say Qt timer, and call it timer, and then we're going to make a slot. Public slots. And it just, if you're wondering, because you've never done this before, yes, a slot is just a normal function. The only difference is you have this public slots. That is the only difference right there. As long as your function is listed underneath a slots, you get public and private. As long as it's listed underneath slots, it'll be treated as a slot. Alright, now let's flip into our actual implementation file here. And we're going to say timer equal new Qt timer. And we want to make the parent the current class. And the reason for this is the class is an object, and if we make an instance of the class, when it's deleted, it'll delete all the children. And we're making the timer a child of this, so the timer pointer will automatically get deleted. Alright. Then we will say actually implement our slot here, my timer, and we'll say my slot. You notice how this has a special icon. It has the slot icon. And there it is, your code for your slot. Voila, not that hard. And we're actually going to say qdebug timer executed. That way, every time the timer is executed, it's just going to print out timer executed. Now, we're not done yet. We've created our timer, but we haven't told it to run. So what we need to do is actually connect it. And the signal is the timeout. And the receiver of that is this, the current object. And the slot is, you guessed it, my slot. And then we can actually take our timer and start it. Now, you notice how it has a couple different ways of doing this. It's got two constructors. It has just a default and in milliseconds. Well, if you do it in milliseconds, you can actually describe, or I should say you can relay how many milliseconds you want in between. So we're going to do 1,000. That way every second, or 1,000 milliseconds, it's going to fire. And when that timer goes off in memory, it's going to call my slot, because remember, we connected it right here. We're still not done. We need to actually create an instance of this. So let's go include, oops, my timer, and then let's actually create an instance of this. And that's it. Alright, now, before I run this, I want to walk through the code really quickly. In the main.cpp, we are starting our application. Here's our Qt core application with arguments and return a_exec. And in between there, we're creating a new myTimer class. The myTimer class is a Qt object, and you see we have the Qt object macro, and we're inheriting the Qt object. And we've made our own slot called mySlot. And in the constructor, we are creating a new timer in memory, connecting the signal and slot, and starting the timer. And it's going to go off every 1,000 milliseconds. And every time it goes off, it's going to print out timer executed. So fingers crossed, compile and run. And if you've followed along, and if I've typed this correctly, the application will start. And then you can see that the timer fires every 1,000 milliseconds. Now, it's important to note that this is not a perfect 1,000 milliseconds. It's off by a couple milliseconds. So you may notice if you're doing some high-performance application, you may need to find another route. But for the basic timing mechanism, this is perfect. Once it's off, the application will start out timer executed. So fingers crossed on slot and starting the timer. And it's going to go out called mySlot. The location, we connected it right here. So we're going to do 1,000. Well, and say children. We want to, as long as it's listed string, we had a good to guess the signal, which is need to be able to then the timer base moves it. You know, we're going to make a timer. What we so we're going to do that. There once just going functions into our a slots. You get a public and private here. And children code start to receive actually the code type of main time and import mechanism. This is perfect.
Okay, then we will meet you in the next video.